Hey, welcome everyone. This is the ninth meeting of the Government Transition Advisory Committees, Districts, and Council Operations Subcommittee. Today is Monday, June 17th, and we'll be here from 12 to 1 p.m. My name is Julia Meyer. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Engagement and Community Participation Manager for the transition. Our co-chair, Terry, is going to facilitate today's meeting. Next slide, please. Just going to take a moment to go over some Zoom logistics. This is a virtual meeting. The meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, and a copy of the recording will be posted on the city's transition webpage under past meetings and events. For today's meeting, we have closed captioning available. To access closed captioning, you can click on the CC button on the bottom of your screen. For committee members, please take this moment to change your chat settings to everyone so that those in attendance can follow along with the chat. And please remember that the chat is part of the public meeting record. For community members listening in, we have the Zoom Q&A feature available. You can submit questions or comments through the Q&A feature. We don't always answer all the questions live, but we do read them, and they also become part of the public meeting record. At today's meeting, we're not taking verbal public comment, but you can give public comment at any time by using our online public comment form, by emailing us at transition@portlandoregon.gov, or by calling 311. Next slide, please, and I'll turn it over to Terry to share today's agenda. Thank you.
So here's the agenda. It's going to be mostly the onboarding plan. Then we'll talk about recommendations of our next steps related to the onboarding plan and upcoming meetings. So that's it for the agenda today. Next. Excused absences, Lori. We're going to approve these meeting summaries in a second, and then move on. I'm not sure, do we have a quorum here? Okay, good. Then let's do this. Any corrections, suggestions for the May 20th meeting summary? Going once, going twice. Seeing none, motion to approve those minutes? Anybody? Going once?
A motion.
Twice? Somebody? Oh, Amy moves. Second.
Second.
Joe seconds. All those in favor? Thumbs up or something, some signal. There we go, good. Passes. Okay, let's do this again for the 29th. Any suggestions, corrections, etc.? Joe?
Yeah, this is a question, and it happened to be me that did this, but that's not exactly why I'm asking. Sometimes in these meetings, rather than taking up the time of the whole group on detailed comments, in this last case, I sent comments to Tate. And I wonder if when that happens, they ought to be attached to the minutes or anything like that. It's question. I'm not even sure how I feel about that, but we don't want to jam up these meetings with lots of detailed comments, but we also don't want to lose them.
Julia, you guys have a preference as to that? I mean,
yeah, I
creating
feel
a record.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, I mean, I'm not worried about losing them. If we want to figure out some way to make sure they live in some folder, I'm okay with that. But I don't want to attach them to meeting minutes, which are a summary of a meeting that happened.
Yeah, that sounds right to me. But Fred, you had something?
Well, yeah, I was going to. Sorry, my clock. It thinks it's noon. There we go. I was thinking that though still not as part of the minutes, but it's just attached to the record of today's meeting, that Joe could transmit them to you, and I mean, and whoever hasn't read them, I mean, let's raise their hands. I think Joe was assiduous at copying everyone individually. with his remarks to Tate. But they're worth capturing somehow in the record of the subcommittee, I think. Julia, up to you.
Yeah, I don't want to take our time with this question now. I just want to raise it as something for the future.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that. It's good, and it would be good to see them somewhere that we could all see them regularly. Okay, so that's it. Meeting summaries, review working agreements. I'm going to skip that. So go to the next slide.
I don't think we approved the meeting summary. Can I?
I'm sorry. Right. Okay. Yeah. Motion to approve the meeting summary. That's it. Joe moves. Second. I'll second. Can I do that? All those in favor, say aye or something. Thumbs up. That passes. Okay, then we can go to the working agreements that I'm going to skip. Next slide. You can skip that one. Skip that one. Okay, so here we are, the onboarding. And this is the bulk of the meeting. We were distributed the draft plan. We can take this time to comment, reflect, discuss, etc. I have a bunch of things, but let's just open it up and get started. Zach.
Just for, do you want me to try to run through my suggested? You can go to me next. You can go to me next.
Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to say that I think we need a sort of protocol for this. I mean, when I get a document and, am asked to review it and comment on it, I mean, I sent my comments to Julia. I think she forwarded them to Tate. In fact, I'm sure that she did because Tate sent a thank you note. And I don't think that we ought to take committee time to sort of talk about comments on the document somehow. And again, this is a general point, not just about today, that we ought to have some way to talk about what's the big picture here, what are the major things that we need to take our time with, and not a detailed commentary on the document.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I have big picture things that I want to discuss, and I think that should be our focus more than the document itself. But feel free. Zach, you ready?
Okay, I think you guys can hear me now. Sorry about that. So yes, and I have only two just like glaringly bad things that need to get addressed within like grammar. March was misspelled on page 3, and then there was just a 2 in the chart for the response of 1 and 2 that just needs to get addressed. But I do have some like a couple big arching questions, so I'm just going to read them and then we can respond to them. One is, so the in-person orientation, we don't have a designated location for that, and I'm just kind of curious if or maybe we do. I apologize if I haven't been to these meetings for a little bit, but I'm wondering if part of City Hall will be ready enough at that time to do some of that kind of familiarization with the new facility. One kind of oversight that I saw was that there wasn't any sort of overview on personal security, which I think is something, we all talked about at length with thinking about the district offices, but I think is important to share and have a conversation with on how there's going to be security for when they're in district or when they're at City Hall. And then there's kind of a big question that I don't know how I feel about it, but there's no meeting with any of the existing elected leaders. Obviously, understanding that there's several who will be running, and we don't want to have quorum. But I thought it might be, something where the mayor, having stepped into the interim role of the new executive leader or whatever, might be available to respond, talk to the broad council about some of the 6 months of experience and or some general thoughts on how he and or staff see council being good stewards of how the city functions. So those were the two big things that I wanted to share.
Okay, Diana, want to talk about those, or should we just keep going?
Sorry, am I to respond to those now, Julia?
Yeah.
Or sorry, Terry, are you?
Sure, yeah.
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to say we got a lot on our plate. And so I think we need to remember that there are real capacity challenges on this team, and we're trying to involve you early in the process. So the documents are not going to be perfect. So please excuse any typos. These are working documents. And they're having a lot of internal collaborations as well. And so having documents open and constantly being edited by many people, it's just part of the process. And I missed, Zach, your second comment about that. So please, if you could put that in writing to me, that would be great. For the in-person orientation, for all the December orientations or sessions, they're largely going to be in the Portland building. That's really the greatest location we have that has some really flexible, large spaces, and it's just really good for multiple options, including hybrid options. You're totally right on about the personal security. This is not complete. Again, this is a working document, and you're absolutely right. I think that's in my notes to add in there. So totally. And the mayor has actually just recently been personally briefed on this and has offered to help, and he's really enthusiastic to be a part of this. So noted. Thank you.
Joe.
Yeah, I want to just start tape by saying this is such a giant step forward. Thank you. I mean, it's obviously you've done a lot of work on this, and that, probably for the first time in this whole process, I feel like we're really on track and have a sense of momentum. And I just want to thank you for the work that you've put into this, and feels like we're in a really good place at this moment. I think the two sort of big things that I have in mind, and they're really process things more than anything else. One of them is this is a lot of moving parts. It's a big project, and I don't know whether this is a GTAC thing or this is just coming from me, but I really strongly recommend that you bring somebody on board who is a professional at training, development, and facilitation, not somebody who has subject matter expertise necessarily, although somebody who is experienced working with this kind of group, elected officials. But it was really a red flag when I saw that sort of very preliminary agenda that showed somebody facilitating for an hour, and then someone else facilitating for a half hour, and someone else facilitating for a little while. I hope that somebody who is a seasoned professional in this field is brought on to manage this whole overall process. And the second thing, and full disclosure, if this were 10 years ago before I retired, I think I'd be the right person. But I'm an elderly retired gentleman now, and I am, not a candidate for that. But I hope that you find somebody who is. And the second is I'd like us to be really clear about what GTAC's role is, because there's going to be a tendency for us to want to get into every weed, and maybe that's helpful and maybe it's not. But I'd like to just be really clear how GTAC's going to be involved at sort of every step of this. And I have a couple of specific questions. One of them is on the calendar when it says something about PSU. And it seemed like it said tentative, or I'm sorry, I should have had this right in front of me. At the moment, it says tentative PSU workshop. I'd like to know what you have in mind there. And last time we met, you talked about bringing a consultant on, and I'd like to know who that is and what that consultant has done, and maybe that addresses my first point.
Diana, anything on that?
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, leadership has really encouraged us to focus on really building skills within our organization, but also recognizing we have a lot of really skilled facilitators in our organization. So I'm not saying we're not thinking about external facilitators. I've noted that in a number of places, but also knowing that one of the key things we've heard about from our current electeds is how valuable these sessions are to meet different people at the city, and especially the subject matter experts who are speaking to the subjects they're experts on. And so I think that's what you're seeing there. For the orientation day in particular, Jamie Duhamel has really been the brain behind proposing that and thinking about that really deeply. So I'll take that feedback back to her and we'll think about that. And then the PSU workshop, I think I mentioned that at our last onboarding meeting. That's external to the city. That's not something we would be hosting. That's something PSU would be hosting. And it's gonna be something that's generally available to electeds everywhere. It's not specifically for City of Portland, but with us in mind, and it's gonna be focused on policy development as well as actually passing policy. And we think it would be a great thing for us to advertise for the new elected officials to go to and attend. So hopefully that's helpful.
And I think you said last time there was a consultant that's working on this?
On the PSU work, yes, on that policy module.
And that's someone at PSU that's doing this?
It's I think it's Amanda Muhaz. Again, I need to make sure I'm pronouncing her name right, is working on that.
Yeah. Fred.
Thank you, Terry. Yeah, 40 years ago, I'd be the person to do this because legal counsel of the League of Oregon Cities, we had a program every 2 years for newly elected officials. And then that was just newly electeds on public records, budget, the meetings law, et cetera, ethics, the whole thing. And it'd be a whole day with different staff speaking. Maybe we'd have some other people brought in, but we'd do it all over the state. Here, you've got some candidates who have served on legislative bodies, city councils, county boards of commissioners. Whether they get elected or not, who knows? On the other hand, you have others that just don't know squat about being a public elected official in the state of Oregon. Bringing in somebody from the Ethics Commission, bringing in somebody from the state auditors. I like you've got experts in-house on almost all of these. We have some training from the city attorney's office, for instance, when we formed. But I kind of agree with Joe. There might be having somebody from the outside look at your overall agenda and giving you a sense of what you haven't covered or how you could better spend the time, and these newly electeds' time might be worth the while. I'm not sure.
Hey, Amy.
I too am a person to hire. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not at all appropriate to do that task. I wanted to know what the involvement of the staff would be in the PSU day, because that day seems pretty important. And so is that generally electeds and their staffs, or are they going to be included, or what effort will they be?
That's up to them. We
Okay.
can't control that. We'll be advertising and encouraging them to go, but that's up to them. But we can definitely also encourage their staff. We're welcoming their staff to any of our onboarding process.
Okay, great.
Okay, I've got some stuff here. And mine is there it comes in sort of two parts. One is the council operations stuff. It is so undeveloped at this point that I'm concerned about it. It relies a lot on the council operations manager, which is, I don't know if that's where that is in the hiring process, but that needs to happen before like this whole council onboarding stuff can get refined further, kind of. So that's a council operations itself, the council operations manager. And I have some concerns about waiting until December to get going. Leaving a week or two of November on the table. And realizing, I think, and I've said this before, that on the first session, I think council members are going to want to do stuff. They're going to want to introduce legislation. They're going to want to set up their calendar for January. And I think preparing that in advance is probably best done in December. But anyway, those are my concerns. And let's say if you guys have any comment on that, I'd be glad to hear it.
Yeah, I wanted to add this to my response to Joe, that the council operations manager is also going to be a key part of this and a facilitator. Early on, I thought to have some external consultants involved in this, and I was advised by leadership to not do that. And so I can't make any promises there. But the council operations manager is going to be key to this and a key facilitator for this. And that's sort of, I think, an important thing to help establish their role with the council as well. And hopefully we'll get someone who has those skills and abilities, obviously. And so that's funded starting this next fiscal year. And so we're going to be hiring for that role as soon as possible. And that's very exciting. I think they need to be hugely involved in this. So all this work is just in preparation for them to come on board, really to be a key decision maker and leader in all of this. And then, that ship has sailed. We're told that we couldn't start onboarding until January, and December was our compromise. And especially since the timing of when the county certifies elections, our partners at the city just feel pretty strongly about that. And so that is what we have. We're going to try to do our best with that timeline, but definitely noted. I might turn it to others, but I will say that we really have to be careful, at least what I've learned from city attorneys and others, that until these mayor and councilors elects are in office, they can't really be making decisions. It's the auditor that really sets the council calendar, and then of course working with them. And so some of those functions you mentioned for December, we really would not be encouraging them to do those. Of course, on their own, they might be planning that, but that's really not our objective and purpose with onboarding.
Okay, Zach.
So acknowledging the reality. I think Terry's right. Like they're going to want to move quickly when they start. There's like one of their very big initial decisions is going to be electing the presiding officer, the council president and vice chair and vice chair. And I just want to make sure. So they're not going to be technically elected. So there's not going to be an issue of like having that meeting necessarily be in public and or recorded, because like them deliberating, considering who they might decide as president come January. Because I'm imagining they're going to show up and they're going to be immediately sizing each other up and thinking about who is maybe best positions to facilitate and lead council. And so I just want to make sure that there's like intentionality in structuring that space if we want to structure that space, and or needing to spell out very cautionary explanation of you cannot have these side conversations if it's somehow problematic to have those not in a public discourse about how they are making those decisions and or discussing how they're going to make a future decision when they become council members. Does that make any sense?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I fully followed that. Sorry.
Well, yeah.
So are you talking about in December?
In December, right. Because they're going to be in an onboarding setting where they're all together. And I think they're just going to, whether you want to or not, they're going to be kind of having those conversations about how they want to have council run and who is going to lead it.
And my understanding is that is their right, and they are not electeds at that point, so they're not triggering quorum or public meeting requirements. So they'll be learning about those kinds of things for when they are electeds, but I've been advised, there's as staff, there's only so much we can't tell them how to do their jobs, and so I think this is maybe where it sort of crosses the line with what staff can tell them to do. But,
sure. I'm just, I think my concern is that the process is going to feel very prescriptive come January if they've already deliberated, and or there's potential of them alluding to having deliberated, and that is going to signal red flags, I think, with public records law and discourse potentially, but I don't know.
Yeah,
just hypothetically think about it.
Yeah, I think we're in a tricky spot because of them needing to do that on their first meeting, and that's just sort of how the case is, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, anybody who's running for council president is probably going to line those votes up in advance over the phone. I would hope and think, and it would be covered by newspapers who are going to have stuff that they'll need to cover during that interim. So, I mean, it's going to happen, whether it's guided by onboarding or not. But I'm just worried that you need to be prepared at that first meeting for a council president and a council that wants to govern and do stuff. So anyway, Joe.
So a couple of things. One is regarding date. The election results aren't going to be certified until December 2nd. And this is the first time that this kind of election has been run. And I have no idea what it's going to be like to run through the whole process. And I think it is a good expectation that we won't know until December 2nd exactly who's been elected. So, whenever we might want to start this, I think realistically, starting it before December 2nd would be a real mistake. I want to go back to this question of managing this process and leadership advising not to have somebody who's an expert at this doing it. We've got a whole lot of moving parts. You've got probably 20 topics here. and figuring out which of those, what sequence those ought to go in, how to deal with the fact that council members are going to have other things on their mind. They're going to be getting together for the first time. They don't necessarily know each other. Some of them are going to be jockeying for position from the very beginning. The council operations manager is a critical person in this, but I wouldn't think that one of the skills you're looking for there is someone who's a professional in training and development. As I said, I'd be a great person to work on this process. I'd be a terrible person to be the council operations manager. And I think the opposite would be true too. So I'd really encourage you for all these reasons, along with the fact that they're not elected, they're not subject to open meetings law, and yet all of this is going to be happening in a fishbowl. And if anything happens outside of an open meeting, people are going to go nuts. And designing that whole process so that it works is going to be a real challenge. And I think it's going to be really important to have people who are experienced and skillful in designing and implementing processes like that. And the fact is, there's never been a process quite like this. So it's not somebody to facilitate the individual meetings. It's somebody to take all of this stuff into consideration, work with the council operations manager and the transition team and all of the subject matter experts to figure out how to pull this off.
I appreciate that. I mean, I think we're way too late, like honestly, and I'm sorry that I'm sorry if this does not seem sufficient, but we have had significant conversation going back to last year about priorities internally for December. And I really think it would be disingenuous to move away from where we have landed for that. And I just really want to help prepare expectations related to how much we're going to shift away from what we've planned. And it's a significant amount of work to follow up on what we have planned for, which I think generally it's unlike anything we've had at the city in previous years for onboarding. And yes, that's warranted here. But I just really want to be realistic here with what I think is possible at this point, because we are really getting close to when we have to pull all of this together. So yeah, we'll take all this back and see what we can do. But I've been tasked with managing this planning process, and there's a significant amount of collaboration and conversation that's happening related to this, and that's going to continue moving forward.
Fred.
Thank you. I've got quite a bit of confidence in Tate and the transition team, what they've done to date, just looking at the draft plan and its comprehensiveness. Not quite complete yet, for instance, obviously, and we know that, but I think it's great the way they've gotten to this point. What I would think that they might want to focus on now, or that we could help them with resources if we have any, of people besides budget and finance, the city attorney's office and the DCAs, if you will, from the 6 service areas in that session, et cetera, who would, you just have to be careful who you get from the outside, like the League of Oregon Cities or the Ethics Commission. Obviously, the auditor's office, they have some input, but that's just getting the scheduling down and the speakers and spots and making sure that the newly electeds know what their choices are. I don't see the need for, certainly at this point, bringing somebody on from the outside who hasn't been privy to all the conversations in the transition team or the current council, the city attorney's office. I think it would just slow Tate and the staff down. And so I think they should be focusing on who's going to speak and what they cover in each of those sessions.
Yes, the content.
Thank you.
I had another thing that's similar to my other things, I guess, but I noticed that the January schedule is being penciled out as well. And again, I have concerns about that, in that you have them meeting only twice a month, and because that's what the charter says. But are you prepared for them to go once a week, starting at that first meeting? Why would they not? That's what the current council does. Why would that not be the expectation? And so that's one point. And then, there are a lot of tours and a lot of work sessions and a lot of people talking at them being scheduled. I was wondering if there is a consideration to put those topics into the council committees as they're formed. So the Public Works tour goes to the Public Works Committee, and they get, a full day of it rather than a couple hours. The Public Safety Committee will see the Public Safety tour and get a much more in-depth version of it. Is that a consideration, again, in January, when those committees theoretically should be existing?
It's an interesting idea. Going back to your first point, I've been really eager to learn about all the things that we need to go to council in the first 6 months to be able to prepare for that, but have been advised, folks won't really know until later. And so we're planning on, in 2 or 3 months from now, hopefully be able to work with leadership at the city to sort of be able to understand that. And we already have commitment from the council clerk to help, map out those calendars. I will note that, what goes to council in the mayor council form of government is actually significantly less. It doesn't mean they're not making meaningful decisions. They still are, but Diana's done analysis of council agendas this year and what on those agendas would go to council next year and what won't. And January was something like 80 something items minus communications, and then it was 50 something in the new council. And so I want to, be clear, the 2 meetings per month is a minimum. That doesn't mean that's going to be exactly what's scheduled. That's going to depend on the council clerk's schedules and what the needs are. And so we will be nimble to what the need is, and then ultimately what the desire is of the 2025 council. And then also that minimum is based on other cities, because they have committee meetings. They sometimes meet less as a full council because of all those committee meetings. And then for the tours, I will say, it's not just about having people talking at them. It's that we've interviewed our current counselors and their staff, and the infrastructure tour that's been done the past couple of years was something they deeply appreciated and really helped educate them. And they're like, I wish I had known this last time I was reviewing a budget, all these things. And so that was hands down the favorite of everyone's onboarding experience. And so that's why we're expanding those tours. And we'll keep thinking about if it makes sense to focus those on committees, but we're thinking it would be valuable for everyone on council to have that sort of experience. And so, yeah, we'll see. And it's probably in the future committees will do more things like that as a committee. And so maybe it's this initial set of onboarding tours for everyone, but that doesn't mean committees can't in the future do things like that, for sure.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I just think that at some point there'll need to be in-depth stuff needs to go to committee. And that should be something that gets early into the mindset of council members. Anything else here? Other comments, suggestions? We are slightly ahead of schedule. A few more minutes on this. Okay, hearing none. Oh, just do we have a deadline for when rules will be written and published for comment?
Are we talking about the rules and procedures document?
Yeah, rules of procedure for the council.
Yeah, I think right now the public comment period for that is planned for September. But yeah, we'll continue as we compare schedules with all our other streams of work. We can keep you updated on that.
Okay. Well, let's go to the next slide then, because oh, Amy.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to say this. It sounds like there's a lot that can't be moved by our advice or efforts. And so I'm just wondering how we focus our attentions, because there's a few things that we'd been sort of tasked to help with. And that's like general research, but we are as a whole committee trying to streamline our work and get out of doing stuff that we don't have jurisdiction or desire by the staff to be doing. So is there a way we can be in a more useful position? Because it sounds like I'm just like how can we put ourselves in a position to offer meaningful support that will or feedback or advice or is it seriously those specific categories or only those specific categories? Because it sounds like there's not actually much leverage to change things.
I think sorry, Amy, were you finished?
Yeah.
I think it's definitely those specific categories for sure. I think where you hear me being very honest about is really the priorities for December. But I mean, we heard great things brought up today, like that focus on security. I still think these conversations are super helpful, and things like that are definitely wonderful things to flag. It's just certain sort of things starting in December, that is pretty set. And so that's why I'm honest about that when that's brought up, oh, we've been through this and these are the reasons it is that way. So I think certain things like that are pretty hard to change. But I think there's nuances to different things. I think, yes, I'm still exploring bringing in external facilitators. So I'm not saying no to that. What I was saying no to is bringing someone in to look at the whole plan and change the whole plan. That's where I was oh, I want to flag that's probably not going to be an option, but that doesn't mean we can't explore external facilitators for other things. That's still something we'll be looking into. So I guess it's a little more nuanced than maybe I came off. So I'm sorry about that. But definitely those areas I highlighted, I think those are great opportunities for GTAC to do research and have input into them. And then I also
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. I was going to say, and we're so limited in our time in December, but I think, January through March and beyond, also your thoughts about that, that's very, very flexible right now and very open for recommendations.
Sorry to cut you off. I will say I appreciate the candor at this point, frankly. We are trying to whittle out our plan, and I think there's been frustration on the committee of feeling like we're putting effort where there's not leverage for movement. So I honestly appreciate the candor and would appreciate that even more so going forward. Please don't make us do work that is not, there's no actual purpose or point to it, because we have real expertise on this group and committee. And if something is not going to move forward for whatever reason, we need to know that, and appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, along those lines, next slide, I think. Well, the slide after this. Okay. This one. This is where we had identified activities where GTAC could be involved. We took some volunteers and we have these things that volunteers can and are volunteering to do. So we should talk about this briefly and see, first of all, from Tate, is this still comport with what your expectations of what GTAC's role can and should be?
Yeah, definitely.
So we have the volunteers lined up. I'm not quite sure how to go through this. But recommend mayor, council, auditor, staff, roles and responsibilities, create clear delineation of responsibilities, expectations, and accountability for individual councilors beyond charter mandates. So these are, I guess, the soft responsibilities that we, GTAC, would suggest to the council as good practice. That's my sort of understanding. Any other comments from others about this little topic area as a GTAC role and chore? Anybody? Okay. Well, I'll say that I was a maybe on this because I'm not sure I understand the clear delineation part of it. I am a pro counselor freedom of oversight and allow counselors to solve constituent problems as they see fit. That said, I think there are probably some soft rules of thumb of what counselors could and should do on behalf of constituents. But I don't know how we frame that soft enough. But Joe, go ahead.
So I think all of these are good things for us to weigh in on. I'm on the list and I'm happy to do that. I think that it has been clear from the beginning, and this was true for the Salary Commission as well as us, that staff probably wisely does not want to put together a job description for counselors. On the other hand, it seems really important that counselors have an understanding of what their job is. And Terry, the example that you brought up, I think, is perfect. What happens? I'm newly elected counselor. I'm really ready to roll up my sleeves and get to work. And the best thing that could happen is for a constituent to call me with a complaint, because then I can call up that staff person in the Water Bureau and tell them that there's a problem in my district and they better get their butt over there. And I'm going to call back next Monday to make sure that you've done it. That's not your job as a counselor. But that needs to be clarified. That needs to be defined by somebody. And I don't think that staff is the right people to say that. I don't think that staff is the right people to say, no, don't call us and tell us to do something. One of the facts that is really, really critical and sort of hard to absorb is, as an individual counselor, you can't tell anybody to do anything other than your one aide or stop doing anything. So what can you do? And I think that's the kind of definition of delineation of responsibilities, expectation, accountability. Make it really clear to them what their job really is and how they can be effective in that job.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's that's a perfectly good example. All I'd say is I might, uh, there's the charter line that gives you responsibilities. There's the employee employer supervisor line that gives you the examples, but it's the softer ones in between. Like, I don't think you call the line staffer for the water that's digging up the street in front of your house, Joe. But I do think that there's sort of an ambassadorial role where a council member has to go to a DCA for that level of communication.
Exactly.
And the DCA better expect it because council members are going to do it. And I hope they do it. And I'm going to call my council members to do some stuff. But I think that's where we would be giving that advice.
Exactly.
Anyway, Tate.
Well, and just to be transparent, we are talking about that because that is in the charter, that counselors are not supposed to interfere with the authorities that have been granted the mayor and city administrator and interfere in the operations of the city. We can talk to them about that, and that is part of what we're doing to prepare for that roles and responsibilities session. And also we're doing this, sort of practice run starting next month for the rest of the year. And so we're even working on some sort of communication protocols to help with different dynamics for that, while the mayor is overseeing all the bureaus. So these are things we're talking about. That's why I want to share that, just so you know that work is happening. That doesn't mean that if GTAC wants to make recommendations above and beyond that you can't do that. We respect the expertise of this group, and anything you prepare, of course, you can share with the new electeds. But I wanted to, in the interest of what Amy shared, I wanted to be clear that we are doing that work as well.
Okay, real quick comments on these other activities. I think they're similar in that these are take some research and they'll take some discussion amongst the volunteers, I guess, to get on at some of these topics. But if these are fair game for GTAC, we have volunteers that are going to do it, I guess. Any more conversation around that other than we'll have to organize ourselves as volunteers, but we can do it. Okay, then. Let's see. Yes. Any more conversation? We can go to the next slide if Julia's back. There we go. Upcoming meetings, listening session coming up next on our list of things to do. The voter candidate. Yeah, go ahead.
Could we go back a slide for just a second?
Okay.
Because I want to make sure that we don't stumble on anything. The last one says, identify curriculum topics or activities beyond those identified by staff that would be valuable for onboarding. But Tate told us a little while ago how much work has gone into identifying these. So I don't want to take that too literally, like, oh yeah, here's 17 other things that you could add to the 32 that you've already got. I suspect that means, is there something that seems really critical that's missing? And I think it's mostly about the kind of thing that Fred was talking about earlier. Here's somebody with expertise in this area that you might consider.
Right. Or these are things that, like, I think Tate was talking about, that should come from community, that should come from not staff, which I would hope there'd be lots of that. But Tate.
Yeah, if you don't mind me, yeah, you're totally right. And that wording I think came from your letter. So that was the wording on your recommendation. But I agree. Like if you disagree with what we prioritize for December or you feel strongly about something else, that doesn't mean that GTAC couldn't do something with the new elected separate from the city or anyone else. And I think also saying like, we're seeing onboarding as bleeding into those first 3 to 6 months of the year, and that time is a lot more flexible as well. So I think that's also a time to fill any gaps as well. So yeah, just to frame that up a little bit, I think there is more opportunity in that.
Okay, that's great. That was helpful. Thanks, Joe. Okay, next slide. Back at these things, the listening sessions are sort of the big deal. Hope folks are getting signed up to participate in that. Voter Outreach Committee, June 27th, Budget and Districts Subcommittee meet again to check in July 30th. So that's the next formal subcommittee meeting. All right, next slide. And I think we're slightly ahead of schedule. So good job, thanks. And I think we volunteers will have to be in touch with each other about doing stuff. I think we can and make that. So that's it. Thanks, guys.
I'm really looking forward to what you come up with.
Sounds